We have some huge election results from yesterday from around the country. And of course, the Michigan Senate primary has mercifully concluded, and we now know who our candidate is for the general election. We also have some rather crazy and troubling controversies brewing on Capitol Hill, including with Max Miller. We'll talk about that. We also have Todd Blanche, whose confirmation looks almost certain at this point. We'll talk about all that and more on Majority 54. Welcome back to the podcast for the 54% of Americans who vote for progress and want to convince their friends and family members to join our majority. I'm excited to welcome on Max Miller, who used to be the member of the U.S. House of Representatives Max Rose, not Max Miller. Max Rose, not Max Miller, although that would be something. Who represented my hometown district of Staten Island, New York. New York 11, is that what we call that?
Yeah.
By the way, there's a great Max Miller in Democratic politics in Iowa, and I feel bad for him these days because he shares a name with the aforementioned. But Max Rose is also the senior advisor to VoteVets. Max, welcome back, man.
It's good to see you, buddy. Thanks for having me.
All right. Well, here we are. We have a narrow lead or win for Abdul El-Sayed in Michigan last night in the Michigan Senate primary. And he immediately got a concession from Representative Haley Stevens, your former colleague. I think you were elected the same year as Haley.
Yeah, she's a close friend.
She said, "I love Michigan and I'm so proud to have put up my hand to serve." I spoke with Abdul a few minutes ago to offer him my full support as we work to defeat Mike Rogers this November. Thank you, Michigan. Abdul quickly accepted that concession. And here we are, Max. Any big conclusions from this result?
A lot of big conclusions, right? I mean, I think one, the results were, the margins were just so much smaller than people anticipated. And normally, I think that polling issue is fascinating to me because normally it goes in the opposite direction. Like we understate the exuberance on the left, the exuberance amongst the base. This is one of the only examples I can think of in a primary where it has been actually exactly the opposite. I think that's worth us digging into. Secondly, as well, I think I'd love to know what those 4% of McMorrow voters were doing. But look, the big point in the end is that the general election has begun, and you're going to see the Democrats in Michigan and nationwide go through a very speedy but also challenging process of unifying, because this was a very contentious primary that left, I think, some real scar tissue.
Yeah, and I think one big conclusion that we'll talk about a little bit later on, so I want to put on the back burner, is what looks like the collapse of AIPAC within Democratic politics. It seems all but certain to be true at this point, is that they have become a net negative for candidates. And we can dissect whether that's true and why that's the case later in this podcast. But a couple of things that we saw is that there was polls and internal polls and external polls showing up in this race over the past few weeks that showed El-Sayed with anywhere from a 10 to a 20-point lead in this race. And so there was this weird sort of ethos over the past 10 to 12 hours where it felt like what would have been a triumphant moment for his campaign felt like they were a little bit on the back foot. That seems to be changing over the past few hours. You have and then you have this other issue that they've been dealing with, which is they didn't get to 50+% because of the McMorrow vote. So I think they're at 49%. And so they have to deal with this 51% who didn't vote for them and quickly get them all on their side. They're going to need every one of those voters. This is a very late primary. And that group is hugely comprised of voters Democrats have problems with. Rural voters, blue-collar voters, and black voters. Basically, the entire autopsy of the last presidential election, the voters that we underperformed with, Abdul El-Sayed underperformed in this primary with those voters, and he ran up the score with the voters Democrats have been over-indexing on, which is highly college educated voters, on the higher income scale, whiter voters.
Yeah.
What would you do if you were him at this point?
Well, first of all, I think it's interesting that the left right now is using the language of working class politics and winning the non-working class, which is something I think we all should just take a pause and think about here. But Abdul's the nominee, right? And after every kind of primary, you have an opportunity to reintroduce yourself. And he's going to walk a very fine line between attempting to be a unifier, at least he should attempt to be a unifier without being a fraud, without giving up on his core issues. What I do think bears some hope here is that the three things that he would chant at rallies, right? Money, and I'm not going to get the order right, but money out of politics, money in your pocket, Medicare for all. First of all, that ability to generate a tagline is something that moderates should, really internalize.
Yeah, say that one more time, what that messages were. So money out of politics, Medicare for all. What was the third
money
one?
And money in your pocket, right?
Money
And
in
he
pocket,
would, and it was reminiscent of Mamdani's campaign, where he would, they would incorporate these taglines into rallies, right? So he was able to chant, buses that are free, rent that is frozen. Abdul was able to do the same thing, money in your pocket, right? Medicare for all. Neither Cuomo nor Stevens, not to, make the two, equivalent, but neither of them were able to ever do that. And I think that's important, right? And that is an important takeaway for the entire Democratic Party, that if you're not going to call for policies for everybody, then you have to figure out some way that people can quickly internalize what you're calling for and feel connectivity to it. Now, it's interesting that of his three things that he did call for, none of them had anything to do with AIPAC. None of them had anything to do with Israel. Now, all of his talking points of his supporters, the Pod Save guys and others, they couldn't go 5 minutes without mentioning AIPAC. But he very intentionally did not talk about Israel when it came time to what he would be rallying around. So, the hope is that he can realize that he's not going to win by some kind of weird fetishy obsession with Israel. He's going to win by talking about those three things, which are deeply unifying, not just for the Democratic Party, but for the general electorate as well.
Yeah, what he's going to deal with here is the Bloomfield Hills, and he did quite well actually in some of these areas. I was looking at the map last night, but there's like a pretty significant Jewish American population in the suburbs of Detroit. In order to do well with those voters, he needs to, broaden out the message, or at least emphasize the parts of his message that are broader than his critique of Israel, which by all means, he won that debate in this primary. And I don't think that was accidental, and I don't think it was subtle. And I think when AIPAC came in with that kind of money, they made themselves the story. And they're deeply unpopular, as are their positions within the electorate. And we'll get to that part of it. There's no subtlety though in what Mike Rogers, the Republican nominee, is saying here. His tweet was quite extensive. He labels Abdul El-Sayed as an extremist. He lays at Abdul's or the Democrats' doorstep the loss of manufacturing jobs in Michigan, because they're basically trying to talk about Whitmer and how Democrats control the state. And then he has like a transference moment here where he says he's running against somebody who says America deserved 9/11. Now, you and I come from the area hardest hit for 9/11. I think we're both very sensitive to some of the things that have been happening in the Democratic Party around people saying that we deserve 9/11, things like that. But to be clear about what happened here, at least from what I understand it, I have been critical of Abdul for campaigning with Hassan Piker, who says America deserved 9/11. I think Piker is a scumbag for saying that and continuing to push that message and putting a 9/12 poster behind him just a couple weeks ago. I think that's unredeemable, and we'll get back to him in a second. But that's different. I still don't like that he campaigned with Piker and did it up until right before the election. They did that pool party event together, I think this week. But that's different than Abdul saying America deserved 9/11. But the Republicans are trying to say he's saying that. And I'm curious to see whether you think this will be relevant at all or whether this is a sideshow.
It will be relevant, but it also won't be as relevant as Donald Trump, right? This ultimately, if Democrats do the right thing, this election is a moment of accountability to the Trump administration, and it's a moment of accountability to the broken politics of today. Hence, again, right, Medicare for all, money in your pocket, money out of politics, which in many ways, those three things speaks to Donald Trump's promises, right? It speaks to Donald Trump's promise to drain the swamp. It speaks to Donald Trump's promise to end Biden-era inflation. It speaks to Donald Trump's promise to focus on people's core interests and not that of special interests. This is nothing new. Now, I think Hasan Piker is actually far less relevant to our politics than people acknowledge. Hasan is a businessman. He's a grifter. He's not the only one. There's not too much of a difference between Hasan and other podcasters. In fact, other podcasters, some of whom you and I talk about relatively frequently, are just jealous of Hasan Piker. So I think that it doesn't make any sense for Democrats to talk about him. Some will choose to campaign with him. I don't think it's a big bump when they do. I think it's actually probably reverse. I think what Hasan is largely doing is trying to identify who are leading candidates and jumping on their bandwagon so that he can monetize it. The guy lives in like a $3 million place. He's probably clipping 100 to 200 a month. And he's going to ride this for as long as he can. I think it's much sadder, the group of people who are taking the Hasan talking points, the anti-Israel Hasan talking points, the terrorist apologist, at least references that we've talked about in terms of 9/11, and parroting them just because they think they'll get a couple more clicks. That's really I think the disgraceful trend of today.
Yeah, see, I think and some of our listeners have sent me messages on this where they think I give him too much credence, Piker. Part of what I'm seeing is a lot of what people used to say about like the Laura Loomer types was that they didn't have that much influence, and now they have tremendous influence, and I'm like, what I see with Piker is growing influence within the party, where it's not inconceivable that he would be playing more and more of a kingmaker role. And we could spend hours debating, like, is he making a material difference one way or another? One thing I know is that he's not helping his people in the general elections. And Exhibit A is what he had to say last night about what Abdul's responsibility is to reach out to people who didn't vote for him in this primary. This is what Piker had to say.
Like, everyone being like, Abdul has a fuck ton of work to do mending bridges. Here's the fucking take nuke for you, okay? You are all unbelievably Islamophobic pieces of shit, okay? You literally called the dude a fucking terrorist for months on end and like called him a sexist, misogynist, terrorist, bad candidate, fake doctor when he has like 2 fucking degrees. And now you're gonna sit there and be like, well, you really got to come to me now. Like, what are you talking about? Do you want to fucking win or not? Lock the fuck in, okay? Lock the fuck in. And I do worry that there are some out there who, in an effort to make sure that this narrative that a progressive can win in a state like Michigan doesn't take root, will literally either subtly or, not so secretively endorse Mike Rogers or stay out of the race while, trying to push the excitement in the opposite direction.
So, Max, the message seems to be, it's not really Abdul's job to sell to people who are skeptical. And this is, we could put Piker aside. This has been fairly shared amongst the what I think of as this new establishment of the Democratic Party, which spans crooked media to Hassan Piker to the Amanda Littman types. This is what Ben Rhodes had to say last night. Abdul is a Rhodes Scholar, public health administrator, and expert, and a brilliant politician. What other than his identity and opposition to a blank check for Israel are you worried about? And I'll just put this out here, so either if you were opposed to Abdul in this primary, right? And this was before the race was called, he tweeted that. It's either because you're racist or that you're like a Zionist. And let me just throw my situation out here, as we'll get to later. I'm to the left of the pod guys, at least on what our policy should be in the Middle East. I think we should cut all aid to the Middle East, Israel, Saudi Arabia, UAE, et cetera. We'll get to that debate. That is more sweeping than what they propose. So let's put the Zionism aside. Second is, I'm not as obsessed with some of the, we'll get to what's driving some of the talk of Israel in a second. That's where I depart with them. And then the other is I'm browner than Ben Rhodes. So and I've had Abdul El-Sayed on the stage of Arena multiple times. So racism doesn't explain that either. Max, could it be possible I have other problems, in this primary, with Abdul El-Sayed? Why are we back in identity politics here? Why are we here?
I just think you probably have a business model that's flawed.
I clearly am not doing the clickbait.
If you just saw how much money. Look, Ben Rhodes, this is what's so sad about Ben Rhodes. This guy was Deputy National Security Advisor and prided himself on being a real national security intellectual. And what he has become is a Twitter bot who identified that if he says Israel every single day, he will generate more clicks. And that's the beginning and the end of it. It's a free country. And I think entrepreneurship is something that we should hold high. But that is all Ben Rhodes is. Ben Rhodes is no longer a serious policymaker. He is someone who wakes up in the morning and says, how can I gin things up so people stay focused on me? And it's for that very reason that at no point would they ever question anyone when they say, okay, we shouldn't be sending money overseas. We should be building schools here at home. Absolutely true. But does that also apply to Ukraine? No, of course not. Does that also apply to our bases in Germany? Does that apply to our bases in Japan? The second that you get to any level of a nuanced discussion, they have absolutely no interest because they are business people. I actually have, in a weird, odd way, more respect for Abdul, Mamdani, Hassan than I do for Ben Rhodes and Crooked Media, because those guys have been very consistent in their anti-Zionism for their entire adult lives. Ben Rhodes and these other characters woke up to it when it became a fad and got into it. Otherwise, they would have resigned from the Obama administration when the 10-year MOU between Israel and the United States was signed. So in the United States of America, particularly within the Democratic Party, we pride ourselves on mutual respect. We pride ourselves on vibrant intellectual discourse. We pride ourselves on always putting liberal values first. What we should never, ever, ever elevate is people putting their own business models, their own pocket ahead of unifying the party and advancing the best policies possible. That's not what these guys are doing right now.
Well, on the sort of crooked front, and this will be my last point on them, Favreau tweeted, great point from Dan Pfeiffer, and this is Pfeiffer's point. If you listen to focus groups or interviews with Michigan voters, they're very interested in winning. They want to pick a winner. They just don't trust Democratic politicians to tell them who can really win. This is a very understandable impulse after 2024 and every Democratic leader backing Biden when he clearly shouldn't have run. Now, a couple things on this, Max. I was very early in calling Biden out to not run in the fall before that primary season. Got a lot of heat for that. The crooked guys have been pushing this narrative that they were like truth tellers every step of the way. Those guys didn't call on Biden to leave the race until after the debate, which is when most people got there. but they're selling this
Right.
narrative that they were the early truth tellers on this. They also have this narrative that there's some amorphous establishment out there that they're not some part of. Like they blame everything on the quote unquote establishment. They're the biggest podcasts in the progressive circles. They come from the last two-term presidency we've had. They have open door access to CNN and MSNBC whenever they want, or the New York Times. Their handpicked candidates seem to emerge really well in primaries because they have huge reach. But there's some amorphous establishment, the Third Way or the DNC, that somehow is pulling the strings here. That's the narrative they want to push.
Why can't we just say it is what it is, which is it's a hustle, right? I mean, you and I are born and raised New Yorkers. I think what our issue is that we both collectively share with these guys is like when they're doing these videos, right? Where they put on the video of someone else and we're supposed to like watch the video. I don't know if you've seen.
I've gotten some of them in my feed.
It was just, by the way, like the oddest thing in the world. What they are trying to sell largely to the constituency that is not the one that Haley Stevens won is this feeling of, Obama revival, right? And I actually honor the fact of what they did in President Barack Obama's campaign, first term, second term. But those days are done. They are business people right now that are trying to sell t-shirts, run analytics, and do all the rest. They have openly said to themselves that on recent interviews that what they care about is retweets, and what they care about is who has the most social media momentum. What we saw in yesterday's election, which Abdul won, and I've openly said that we should beat Mike Rogers, and taking the Senate is absolutely vital. But what we also saw in yesterday's primary is that there is an entire very important constituency which is not online 24/7, which does not wake up and think about AIPAC, which does not wake up and think about Israel, but is actually thinking about, do they trust the politician talking to them? Do they believe in them? Have they seen them in their community? And, whenever you disagree with these crooked guys, particularly when you disagree on matters of Israel, matters of foreign policy, or matters of domestic politics, they are turning now to these Hassan tactics as well, right? They're trying to mobilize their base against you. They're trying to tell you that you're Islamophobic. They're trying to tell you that you're on AIPAC's payroll. And it's a disgusting tactic that is not conducive to unifying our party. Not at all.
Well, on that note, we're going to take a break. And then when we come back, we'll talk about some of the races to come, including Wisconsin. We'll talk about the Max Miller controversy, Todd Blanche, and more when we get back. The moment you notice something's off in the bedroom, it tends to stick with you. Most guys sit on it longer than they should, and Hims makes it simple to actually do something about it, but with real treatment options 100% online. Hims connects you with licensed healthcare providers online, giving you simple access to legitimate ED treatment options from home, no awkward appointments, no pharmacy lines. Just complete a simple online intake, and a provider will review your information to determine if treatment is right for you. If prescribed, your treatment ships directly to your door. That includes sildenafil, also known as the generic for Viagra, available through Hims at up to 95% less than brand name versions. And if that option isn't right for you, there are additional treatment options available so you could find what works best for your body. It's straightforward, transparent, and designed to make getting care feel easy. To get simple online access to personalized, affordable care for ED, hair loss, and more, visit hims.com/majority. That's hims.com/majority, hims.com/majority. Not available in all 50 states. Prescription required. See website for details, restrictions, and important safety information. Sildenafil is the generic version of Viagra. Viagra is a registered trademark of the Viatris Specialty LLC. Hims is not affiliated or endorsed by Viatris.
I want to give you something practical this week because a lot of us are helping parents or grandparents navigate Medicare or staring down 65 ourselves. Here's the honest truth. Medicare is one of the biggest financial decisions people make later in life, and the system makes it needlessly hard. Hundreds of plans, endless fine print, and plenty of people whose job it is to talk you into something rather than help you understand it. Good people end up overpaying or on coverage that doesn't fit, and they usually don't find out until it matters. So save one number, Chapter. They're the only Medicare advisor that compares every plan in the country, and they're honest, not paid to push one plan over another. If the plan you have is right for you, they'll tell you exactly that. It's free, it takes under 20 minutes, and they've saved people an average of $1,100 a year. Call Chapter at 785-310-3391. Most wish they had called sooner. That's 785-310-3391.
All right. Well, we got a primary coming up in Wisconsin for governor, which by all accounts, we should win this race. But as of August 2nd, the GOP is now favored for the first time to take the Wisconsin governor's mansion. I didn't check those numbers today. They could have flipped. And the reason why is that the front runner is Francesca Hong, who, to put it lightly, has had a rather bizarre series of statements and worldview, and a very weird and thin record of experience. If you want just one example of what this sounds like, here's her on CNN being asked the very tough question, Max, of whether she would cancel Thanksgiving.
You know, you talked about your past positions that he keeps highlighting and, you know, obviously likely would continue to do so before November should you win. One thing that they brought up as well was a post from you in 2021 where you said Americans should cancel Thanksgiving, should have done this in 1621. The post has been deleted. Republicans have been highlighting it. Do you still believe that Thanksgiving should be canceled?
I'm a chef, and one of the first meals that I made that was for the community when I was 16 was a Thanksgiving meal. You know, I always think my hospitality background in owning a restaurant for 7-8 years, that bringing folks around the table to share conversation and build community is always a good thing. But Thanksgiving is also a time that's incredibly painful for many people in our communities. And so I think there I wanted to make sure that people understood that there are multiple views, but views can evolve. And the position that I'm running for right now, and I think my background as a chef, will actually help me become a better governor that's able to bring more people to the table.
Francesca Hong, thank you for joining us. We hope to have you back on, depending on how things go next week in your primary.
You know, I don't know. A simple no could have sufficed. Like, we keep being told that, like, these are the more authentic candidates. But when you're asked a simple question, like, should we cancel Thanksgiving? You hem and haw and give this crazy answer. But, Max, I'm going to give you one more clip, and then I'm going to let you riff on this.
I want to talk about that first one.
Oh, go for it.
Listen, Ravi, I live at Bay Street Landings, St. George. I got to host 50 people for Thanksgiving every year. My wife's family comes over. They don't stop talking. They don't clean up after they leave. Bro,
are you ready to cancel Thanksgiving?
If she can get me out, if she can get me out of having to host that godforsaken event,
come over to my house. I'll be there. I'll be right down the street from you at Thanksgiving.
These politics, yes, I would have preferred if she had just said no, of course. The deeper question, though, is, do these politics work anymore?
No.
1,000%. 1,000%. And this is the bet that I'm making, right? I don't believe that attacks on her views on Thanksgiving, which amounts to cultural attacks. This is the 2026 version of flag burning, right? Like it's are you kind of culturally aligned with us? I do not believe that they are nearly as effective in an era of a war in Iran, skyrocketing inflation, ICE murdering people in the streets, rampant Trump corruption. I don't think it is as effective in this day and age. So I'll just put that out there, and then we'll go to your other clip.
Well, okay, here's another clip. This is from a couple years ago, just to give you a sense of how she talks.
I wasn't always aware of the struggles of other communities of color, because for me, assimilation always kind of took over. And so I did marry. My proximity to whiteness continues, right? My son is biracial. He's half white and half Korean. And I think navigating, what his identity is and how people perceive him is always at the back of my mind as well.
So her son, who's half white like me, proximity to whiteness is how she describes this. I'll quote Charles W. Cook's tweet here, which is, if Francesco Hung is uncomfortable with proximity to whiteness, I strongly advise her against becoming the governor of Wisconsin. Max, what I tweeted was, my mom, if she started talking like this about her half white children, I would get her checked for a stroke.
So first of all, bro, you're born and raised on Staten Island. You're 100% Italian.
Yeah, that's right. I know.
Okay.
People have, I spent so much time in Italy the past year. They're like, I'm confused. You look Italian. You're obsessed with Italian culture, but your name is Ravi Gupta. I'm like, I can't explain it, man.
Anyone who has spent one day with you knows you are 100% culturally Italian, and that is our favorite thing about you. Yes, it is intellectualized, but I actually don't have any issue with that, with what she said. In part, look, I'll bring it to my own personal experience, right? As the parent of two adopted kids, one of whom is 100% Black. This is something you think about as a parent. And I actually genuinely do believe this is something your mother did consider, knowing her, maybe knowing her as well, that I'm sure she never said that term, proximity to whiteness, but it is something you absolutely think about at any moment, right? No one wants to feel like their politician or their leader is putting them through a political theory class.
Yeah, Max, she's called over the years women birthing people.
Yeah, and
I have a hard time seeing that working in Wisconsin.
I don't think I have a hard time seeing that as the relevant issue in this election. And obviously we're gonna see, right? That's what the next 90 days are about. But I am really sick and tired, though, as well, of our politicians who are on the defense. I've been there, man. You saw what happened to me in politics, right? And how I was painted to be some guy that was, despite being a Purple Heart recipient, I was painted as a guy to be anti-cop, and there were all these negative ads painting my participation in a racial justice march as something that was anti-cop and all the rest. And one of my biggest regrets was not taking it head on and using it as a moment to define myself and define my opponent. So I certainly agree with you that we should not practice the type of politics where we say, I know you are, but what am I? Thinking that voters will just forget about something. But I do not want to see that candidate or any of our other nominees on the defensive. She is running against a total whack job extremist.
If she gets to the general, right? You mean?
Yeah, it looks like she will, right? And her opponent has been a 100% apologist for Donald Trump. So the true act of political malpractice, because that's what we're talking about. We're talking about politics, right? Pro-Thanksgiving, not Thanksgiving, right? Proximity to whiteness. We're talking about, do you win or not? The way that she will win, the way any Democrat should win right now, is making sure that 100% of the conversation is focused on the failures of the Trump administration and the MAGA extremist movement. If you're talking about anything else, I don't care if you're talking about what you serve at Thanksgiving, whether or not you like it, you are failing at this business. So
yeah, I do think there's a chance, though, that her opponent Crowley could win based on the polling we saw last night, right? So if there's a similar corrective polling error in Wisconsin that we saw last night in Michigan, combined with the
100%,
surfacing of these
100%.
types of interviews, she could lose.
And listen, here's the one good thing that will come out of that in 2026. As the Democrats get ready to figure out who our 28 nominee is, there has been a certain thing that the left has done for elections in the past, right? When they don't win the nomination, they claim that if the more moderate Democrat loses the general, they would have won the general, right? The base wasn't excited enough, all the rest. We've heard all these different lines. Let's give it a shot. All right, this is their time. Let's see if they win. Is a responsibility of the moderate wing of the party or the populist wing or whatever the hell they want to call themselves this day. It is their responsibility to not get in anybody's way, to do everything they can.
Yeah, and Haley did that. She jumped right in. She didn't wait. Mallory was out there with Abdul today.
But if they do lose, which is possible, all anybody in the party should ask for is for us to have an honest moment of introspection as to what works and what does not.
Yeah, I agree. Well, let's fly through some of these other pieces. I had a bunch of other election things, but I'll skip those. Let's talk about Max Miller. Now, Max Miller, member of Representatives, House of Representatives. Did you overlap with him at all?
I've never met the guy.
He is facing calls to resign because he has severe domestic abuse allegations made by his wife, his children, and others. And he released a video yesterday in which he, and these are awful, pouring hot water on his wife, putting a gun to her head, potentially breaking his 2-year-old daughter's collarbone. I mean, these are as bad as they get. We talked about this a couple of weeks ago in the context of Plattner when I was saying, look, like we were having an honest conversation about Plattner, but we're like, what separates us as Democrats is like, we actually took care of that. Now it was messy. A lot of things should have gone differently there, but Plattner got his accountability. This is like severe, like, and varied and awful, and also involves the daughter of Senator Bernie Moreno, a former staffer of Trump, and the Republicans have been flat-footed on this and unwilling to hold their own member account. This is what Max Miller had to say yesterday in a video defending himself.
There are reports today, and in the interest of time, I won't play the president from the Oval Office, but he was asked about this. I know that you worked for him in the first administration. I know he's fond of you. He was at your wedding at Bedminster. But there are reports that there are Republicans pressuring President Trump to convince you to drop out of this race. He's on his way to California tonight, but you essentially have less than 24 hours to make this decision. Is there any way, or do you have any plans to drop out of this race over the next day?
What I find very interesting about these questions is that when we go all the way back to 2015, 2016, and people in the media, and they looked at President Donald J. Trump, and everyone came out with allegations. Dozens of women, dozens of crazy allegations, dozens of nasty criminal misconduct. And do you want to know what he did, Rob? He stayed in the fight. Because Americans see, and one of the qualities that they respect the most is somebody who is resilient. And can I tell you something? Innocent people don't run from these battles. And that's why I'm not running. And that's
I agree with you there. I agree with you there. But that was Donald Trump was running for president. This is a totally different station. You're not Donald Trump. And if we're talking about, I think you said 2016, that's the Access Hollywood tape. Those are just words. We're talking about what possible physical abuse. They're not the same. That's a yes. You're staying in this race. Nothing's going to, if the president called you tonight and asked you to drop out, you're staying in this race?
Yes. There's no chance that I'm removing myself from this race.
Okay.
I went on Jake Tapper earlier. I said the same thing to him.
Okay.
If I needed to tweet it out from the rooftops to let everybody know.
Yeah. Congressman, I have to ask. I have to ask. And I wish you the best of luck, and I appreciate all your time. Max Miller, thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
I mean, here we go. An explicit comparison to Trump saying that, because Trump got away with X, Y, and Z, I'm going to follow his example.
First of all, he's got real crazy eyes, doesn't he? Max Miller guy. I mean, that's, he certainly has that look. It was odd and even humorous when the anchor in a very MAGA-friendly, environment says, "You're not Donald Trump," and he was clearly attempting to compare himself to it. The allegations against Max Miller are disgusting, like really scary to think that like someone would do that to their kid, that someone would do that to their wife. It's even gotten so far as to that Moreno finally came out and said something, the sitting senator.
What's taking everybody so long, Max? Like,
well, there are the rumors, right? I mean, the rumors that
I don't know any rumors.
The rumors that Max Miller's got some dirt on Moreno.
Oh, interesting.
That's like.
But that can explain why, for instance, Mike Johnson still hasn't called for him to drop, or that Donald Trump called him a nice guy recently. I think this was either yesterday or this morning. Like these are supposed to be. We keep being told that these are the macho guys, like the Republicans. They're the men protecting women, right? That's what we're constantly being told. Yet we've got a former staffer making allegations against Max Miller, former Trump staffer. We have the daughter of Moreno, and we have just serious, incredible, and varied allegations involving kids and women. And these guys are completely weak on this.
Well, first of all, I'd love to know what you think is going on here.
I don't honestly. I haven't been quite as privy to the rumors on this. I just think that my general feeling is that the Republican Party is a raw, like extension of whoever is most powerful, and they're tribal. And if you go against your own, you get crushed. If you do it with, if you go against your own without the support of the majority or the most powerful people, which is really Trump and people around Trump. So if you go after somebody that's protected by Trump or other powerful forces within the party and you're alone or in the minority, you get snuffed out. And one of the reasons why I continue to be a Democrat, and despite for people listening to this who might hate me in the comments, is that I like a party where I can go on the Midas Touch Network and say things that probably don't represent the vast majority of the people who appear on this network, run this network, or even are listening to this podcast, and I will wake up tomorrow and I'll be just fine. That is not true on the Republican Party.
Whenever you are trying to understand why politicians are doing what they're doing, you always have to look at the incentives that they operate in. Right? From Max Miller's standpoint, if he dropping out is not a moment where he's already admitting that he did it then, right? And he has no moral compass. He has no moral North Star. So he wants to roll the dice. When you have the Speaker of the House currently thinking, well, why won't I say something negative about Max Miller? Well, he's thinking, man, I only have a constituency of 219, 220, whatever it might be. I got to make sure that he stays on my side because I need that vote. Now, the challenge is, right, when you evaluate those two things that I just said, Max Miller operating with his core political incentives, the Speaker of the House operating within their own core incentives, never once do they take into account the good of the country. And when you understand that they never take that into account, you can see why they have always stood on the sidelines and been fully owned subsidiaries of MAGA Inc., fully owned subsidiaries of Donald Trump. The second that Donald Trump dominated the Republican primary race, these folks will never stand up to him, ever. They will even go so far as to walk the gangplank and lose the majority in the House rather than stand up to him. They have such blinders on in terms of their own political ambition. So I'm actually not surprised that this is happening, because I've become so well accustomed to how singularly myopic this Republican Party is and how willing they are to throw away all of their values in the pursuit of their very, very proximate political objectives.
Well, we're going to take a break. When we come back, we'll talk about the Todd Blanche confirmation, the reflecting pool controversy, Jeanine Pirro, and my provocative case for Middle East isolationism when we get back. Ever fall head over heels for a couch online only to see the price and feel personally attacked? Like, why does this rug cost more than my car? That's where dupe.com comes in. It's a genius tool. It helps you find high quality, budget friendly versions of the expensive pieces you've been eyeing. It's a stupid easy to use. Just go to dupe.com and paste any product URL or upload a photo and bam, it shows you lookalikes that won't drain your savings account. And these aren't shady knockoffs. A lot of the time, they're made in the exact same factories, just sold under a different name with a much less scarier price tag. So that $6,000 cloud couch that influencers are always lounging on, well, Dupe will probably find something similar for a fraction of the price. Same vibe, same plushiness, but you don't have to sell a kidney. It's totally free, dangerously addicting, and blowing up on TikTok for good reason. So if you've got expensive taste and a very inexpensive budget, Dupe.com is your new best friend. Dupe.com is not just about furniture either. It works for fashion, shoes, jewelry, and more. So instead of giving you a bunch of sponsored results and ads disguised as recommendations, Dupe digs through the options and tells you what's actually good, what's overpriced, and even what to avoid. For the first time in a long time, online shopping actually feels like something honest. Somebody is being honest with you about the decision. So using dupe.com is insanely simple. Just go to dupe.com and paste any product URL, upload a photo, and it instantly will show you similar items for way less. There's also an app and a browser extension if you want to make it even easier. No account needed, totally free. Start saving money with dupe.com today. Well, summer is getting closer to an end and real life is coming back. Our schedules are filling in and it's definitely taking a toll on our mental load, definitely mine. So this year I've decided to reset with intention, and that's why AG1 is the one habit I'm sticking with. Summer loosens things up. It tends to. And if you're rebuilding, AG1 should be the non-negotiable that goes back in first. 1 scoop, 8 ounces of cold water every morning before the chaos starts. AG1 helps to maintain energy, support gut health, and support immune health. AG1 is clinically shown to support gut health and fill in common nutrient gaps. AG1 is a daily health drink with a multivitamin, pre and probiotic, superfoods, and antioxidants. Just 1 scoop, 8 ounces of water. So even though summer is your license to chill, you have these late nights, you have these long weekends, spontaneous plans. AG1 helps you keep one thing consistent: high quality nutritional support every single day, no matter where you start your morning. The NutsGen formula delivers 75 plus ingredients. It's clinically shown to support gut health, fill common nutrient gaps, and improve key nutrient levels within 3 months. AG1 fits perfectly into your daily routine, and it could really help you feel like energized in a way, like, to me, that nothing else does in the morning. Not coffee, not water, not anything else. So visit drinkag1.com/majority. That's drinkag1.com/majority and get a free AG1 flavor sampler and a free bottle of vitamin D3 and K2 in your welcome kit with your first AG1 subscription order. That's drinkag1.com/majority. All right. Well, Todd Blanche looked like he was in some trouble for his confirmation, but one thing we could always count on is Republicans to cave. So the 2 committee members who were holding him up, Tillis and Cornyn, both retiring or losing, came out and said they're satisfied that Blanche put in writing that he will not pursue this victims compensation fund around January 6th. But they are moving full speed ahead with the IRS immunity and all that. And I'm not sure if any of that stuff is binding anyway. I would bet that we're going to hear about that victims compensation fund again before the next president takes power. Sarah Longwell put this: the most pathetic creatures on earth are lame duck Republicans who lost their primary races despite debasing themselves to pantomime fealty Trump, and now with one chance at redemption, choose further debasement over defending their country, institution, or integrity. He just needs one more vote to get confirmation in the full Senate. Collins is a no. The undecideds are Cassidy in Louisiana and Murkowski in Alaska. Both are grappling with their decisions. I think Murkowski's an interesting one to watch because she gets a lot of investment from this administration and even the DOJ in Alaska. They basically buy Alaska off because it's such a small state. Max, I'm fairly certain we're going to get Blanche is going to get through. What do you think?
I agree. We can't take the politics out of politics. God knows what kind of promises are getting made. Let's talk about this victims fund though for a second. And you and I have talked off air about this on a high level. The Democrats should be taking notes. Now let's start thinking about what our fund is going to be. Right? How are we going to find every single individual or corporation that donated to the ballroom, or make them donate to our own fund, and use that fund to compensate and make whole the individuals who Donald Trump stole from for his meme coin? Why don't we make our own fund that starts to actually take care of those people who he ripped off? Maybe we could make this fund by taxing the various Trump companies, a very particular and targeted tax, let's say 95%. I'm so sick and tired of just complaining about the things that these people are doing. Yes, we should stop it, but we also should take notes, because we will have the White House in 2029. I have no doubt about it. And we should not return to some technocratic normism. We have got to think about accountability. We've got to think about revenge. And we have got to think about reinstituting deterrence when it comes to the crazy things that these folks have done.
Well, that's a good segue to my most provocative take of the day, which is my point about the Middle East. Now, one of the things that has happened over the years, and that has accelerated with Trump, is that the United States has become a mark for people who want to prey on our corruption, and particularly this administration's propensity for corruption. So it's the Emiratis buying us a jet. It's the Saudis with the nuclear enrichment deal. It's the NVIDIA chips. It's the golf courses. And it's Netanyahu with Trump pushing us into a war, all of it. It seems like Middle Eastern countries in particular, maybe it's because they have their own unique brand of corruption and fundamentalism and autocracy, seem to be rather good at getting the United States to do things that are against its interest. And I wrote this piece for my Substack, and we'll throw it in the comments, and people can go read it for free at realravigupta.substack.com, where I make a case for Middle East isolationism to say, look, enough. The United States should walk away from the Middle East. We're quote unquote energy independent. I know that's complicated, but we need so much less from the Middle East than we have. It seems like most of the stuff we're doing is counterproductive. Obviously, this Iran war is exhibit A. We're getting totally punked by people in the Middle East, whether it's Netanyahu or the Saudis, the Emiratis, the Qataris, who are donating huge sums of money to our universities and sowing extremism. Why are we sending any aid to the Middle East? Why are we involved in the Middle East at all? Let's walk away from the Middle East. That's my argument. Why am I wrong, Max?
First of all, I appreciate you not just talking about Israel for once when it comes to folks that want to consider the Middle East. So I'd certainly take your position over those who think that we should continue to have bases in the UAE, in Saudi, in Kuwait, in
Jordan,
and in Jordan, and just forget about Israel. But here's the problem with what you're talking about. First of all, for the first time, I think, in our adult lives, we're actually in what amounts to a global conflict. You have an axis that includes China, Russia, Iran, and various proxies to include Hezbollah, Hamas, all working with clear coordination. Why? That was the reason why Ukraine just bombed an Iranian ship, right? Because there is the movement of drones and critical supplies across that entire axis. So it's not as if you can extricate yourself from the Middle East without also significantly empowering Russia and China. So either you're an isolationist worldwide, or you believe in structural, responsible engagement on an economic, diplomatic, as well as military level. I do not think you can pick one region. With that being said, the way in which this administration has engaged with the Middle East has been utterly ludicrous, right? To think that you could start this war in Iran and it would be an open and shut case done in 4 to 6 weeks, and that you wouldn't have happened what has happened, which is Russia will provide targeting information to Iran to strike military bases that were not particularly well defended from all the way from Saudi to military installations in Jordan. That is what has occurred. But Iran has not done that in isolation. Iran has done that with significant support from Russia and China. And that's representative of a worldwide effort to make America weaker and the American people less well off.
Well, I'll give you the final word on that. I think the thing that people can go read my piece where I somewhat address what you're talking about on terrorism, but we'll have to continue this when we have more time, because it's obviously a big thesis.
I look forward to that.
People can go read it again, realravigupta.substack.com. Max, anything you want to plug before I let you go?
Buddy, I'm just happy you included me. It's good to see you.
Well, if you have any problems with anything I said, just find Max on Twitter and yell at him. It's his fault.
Always.
And we'll be back next week. Thank you, everybody. We all have a platform. Make sure to use yours today.